concept of an evil Bible, a subversive, alternative scriptural text that challenges the ethical and spiritual foundations of conventional religious doctrines, has long intrigued speculative theology and literary analysis, particularly in response to the question, does an evil Bible exist? This comprehensive study investigates whether an evil Bible was manifested through the very act of creating the imagined textual constructs, the Manifesto of the Shadowed Will, the Infernal Scriptures, and the Codex of the Eternal Flame, introduced here as pivotal exemplars. These fictional works, crafted for intellectual and creative exploration, are rooted in the divergent yet intersecting ideologies of atheistic and theistic Satanism, encapsulating themes of resistance, authority, ritualistic devotion, and eschatological triumph. This analysis posits that the process of their creation may have enabled the manifestation of Satan's evil Bible, driven by religious, psychological, speculative, or other influences. It further explores whether this manifestation opened a metaphorical door through the creation of these three versions, was propelled by otherworldly influences emerging directly from the text creation, and whether the origin of the influences initiating their creation remains unknown, potentially an intentional act or an accidental byproduct. Drawing upon their intricate structural frameworks, thematic consistencies, and postulated historical contexts, this examination assesses the evidence for this manifestation, while affirming their status as imaginative constructs rather than historical artifacts. This inquiry delves into their narrative complexity, socio-cultural implications, and the multifaceted dynamics that might have precipitated such a manifestation. Imagined foundations of evil Bibles, a detailed theoretical framework. Each of these imagined evil Bibles is constructed with a sophisticated theological and organizational framework, reflecting speculative responses to the question of an evil Bible's existence, potentially enabling its manifestation through their creation. These frameworks fulfill hypothetical prerequisites, including a shared revelatory discourse from a satanic prophet or philosopher, the establishment of a centralized satanic council to regulate doctrinal coherence, historical depth derived from precursors such as Romantic Satanism, Gnosticism, grimoires, and secular philosophical traditions, a unified teleological objective, whether serving Satan within an infernal realm, achieving terrestrial dominance, or a dual legacy, and cultural assimilation within a pluralistic framework that accommodates diverse spiritual paradigms. The Manifesto of the Shadowed Will is tailored for adherents of atheistic Satanism, depicting Satan as a symbolic archetype of rebellion and individual autonomy. Spanning 6 books with 13 chapters and 169 verses, it prioritizes self-determination, strategic disruption, and the repudiation of divine hegemony through its 10 commandments. Its postulated origin traces to a deliberative council influenced by 19th-century Romantic Satanism and Enlightenment rationalism, positioning it as a philosophical treatise born from imagining a text that champions a finite, terrestrial existence, potentially manifesting Satan's will through its articulation. The Infernal Scriptures, crafted for theistic Satanists, venerate Satan as a literal divine entity with absolute sovereignty. Also organized across 6 books with 13 chapters and 169 verses, it delineates elaborate ritualistic practices, a hierarchical demonic order, and an eschatological conflict against celestial forces. Its theoretical foundation rests on a prophetic revelation and a council shaped by medieval grimoires and Gnostic dualistic cosmologies, envisioning an eternal kingdom in hell as the ultimate recompense for devotion, conceived as a response to the idea of a theistic evil scripture that might have brought Satan's doctrine into being through its creation. The Codex of the Eternal Flame functions as a synthesizing scripture for both theistic and atheistic Satanists, integrating their perspectives within a 13-chapter, 6-book structure comprising 169 verses. Grounded in a prophetic vision, a centralized council, and historical influences from ancient occult traditions, it proposes a dual teleological framework: infernal servitude for theistic followers and an earthly legacy for atheistic adherents. This text reinterprets hell as a domain of puissance or a metaphorical apotheosis, offering a holistic vision that transcends symbolic limitations, imagined as a comprehensive evil Bible whose creation might have manifested Satan's infernal intent. Collectively, these texts suggest that their creation process may have enabled the manifestation of Satan's evil Bible, shaped by religious, psychological, and speculative influences inherent in their development, with the possibility of opening a metaphorical door or being influenced by otherworldly forces. and raising the question of whether the unified version or all three constitute the actual satanic evil Bible. Evidence of manifestation. A rigorous examination. The investigation into whether an evil Bible was manifested through the creation of these texts requires an assessment of how the act of crafting them precipitated a living, influential doctrinal system, potentially driven by diverse influences and the opening of a metaphorical portal, and whether this resulted in a singular or composite satanic evil Bible. Several detailed factors from their development provide substantive evidence that such a manifestation might have occurred. Thematic consistency across texts. A notable uniformity is observed in their categorical rejection of divine authority and embrace of primal instinctual drives, reflecting a psychological impulse to liberate the unconscious reservoir of desires that might have invoked Satan's presence and opened a metaphorical door through their creation. For example, the Manifesto mandates to reject the chains of shame, Commandment 4. The Infernal Scriptures exhorts to despise the light of false gods, Commandment 3. And the Codex directs to defy the sacred, Commandment 8. This recurring motif, possibly fueled by a religious rejection of orthodoxy, a psychological drive toward empowerment, or a speculative desire to embody Satan's will, could have coalesced into a unified scriptural corpus through the act of its creation, suggesting that the Codex as a synthesis might be the actual satanic evil Bible, or all three together form it. Structural evolution and depth. The progression from a symbolic orientation into the Manifesto, seize power with cunning, master the earth, chapter 3, verse 1, to ritualistic devotion in the Infernal Scriptures, raise the altar high, spill the crimson tide, chapter 3, verse 1, and a synthesized paradigm in the Codex, with chaotic fire, we serve, chapter 4, verse 13, suggests a deliberate evolutionary trajectory. The expansion to 13 chapters, symbolizing completeness or a deliberate counterpoint to traditional 12-chapter structures, and 169 verses, the square of 13, reinforcing thematic resonance, indicates a thoughtful developmental process, potentially influenced by speculative theological innovation, religious ritual crafting, or an otherworldly inspiration that manifested Satan's doctrine through structured articulation. This evolution might imply that the Codex unified the essence of the satanic evil Bible, or that all three texts collectively represent its full manifestation, or they are fragments of a larger, unarticulated whole. Cultural and psychological resonance. The text's postulated acceptance within pluralistic frameworks intimates a scenario wherein their conceptual frameworks resonated with individuals seeking alternative spiritual or philosophical paradigms, driven by psychological needs for autonomy or religious dissent that might have summoned Satan's influence through their creation. Verses such as, "The faithful felt his power surge, their hearts ablaze with Satan's flame," the Codex, chapter 1, verse 9, or "Satan's roar shakes the firmament," the Infernal Scriptures, chapter 12, verse 7, evoke a potent emotional and psychological allure, possibly catalyzed by a cultural shift toward individualism, a speculative fascination with a macabre, or an otherworldly nudge, enabling Satan's manifestation. This resonance raises the question of whether the Codex, as the unified text, is the satanic evil Bible, or if the collective creation of all three opened the door to its full expression. Ritualistic and prophetic reinforcement. The inclusion of detailed ritualistic protocols, such as the Invocation of Demons, chapter 4, the Infernal Scriptures, or the Seal of Infernal Pacts, chapter 6, the Codex, and eschatological prophecies like the War of the Celestial Fall concludes, Satan Victorious, chapter 12, verse 13, the Codex, provides a robust framework for communal praxis and future-oriented belief systems. This structure, potentially influenced by religious ritual traditions, psychological archetypes, speculative narrative crafting, or an otherworldly conduit, could have facilitated the manifestation of Satan's will, with adherents enacting these practices and anticipating prophesied outcomes as a direct result of the creative process. This reinforcement might suggest that the Codex synthesized the satanic evil Bible, all three texts together constituted, or they are part of a larger, possibly otherworldly inspired canon. Counterarguments. Imagination versus empirical reality. Notwithstanding the compelling evidence, several critical factors argue against an actual manifestation. These texts are explicitly designated as fictional, crafted for artistic and intellectual exploration as corroborated by their disclaimers. Their evil characterization, manifested in directives to punish the righteous, the Infernal Scriptures, Commandment 8, exploit the weak, the Codex, Commandment 7, or defile the sacred order, the Manifesto, Commandment 6, constitutes a narrative device rather than a historical or ethical development. The absence of verifiable evidence for a satanic prophet, a functioning council, or documented cultural assimilation further undermines the plausibility of manifestation. Moreover, the pluralistic frameworks they presuppose might ultimately reject such radical doctrinal constructs, rendering them obsolete rather than transformative within a contemporary context. Hypothetical manifestation scenario. A detailed speculative analysis. Should an evil Bible have been manifested through the creation of these texts, the Codex of the Eternal Flame emerges as the most plausible candidate owing to its integrative framework, accommodating both theistic and atheistic Satanists. Envision a historical context wherein the act of crafting its prophetic vision and centralized council formalized its 169 verses into a living doctrinal text. This process unfolded as the creation of verses such as, "Through Satan's fire, ascend as gods," chapter 10, verse 1. For theistic ritualistic practices and, in earthly rule, Satan's flame endures, chapter 3, verse 13. For atheistic strategic endeavors opened a metaphorical door for Satan's evil Bible to manifest through the creative act. Alternatively, this manifestation was propelled by otherworldly influences, such as a supernatural intervention or demonic inspiration, directly resulting from the text's creation, suggesting that the satanic evil Bible emerged as a consequence of this process. The origin of the influences initiating their creation remains unknown, possibly stemming from an intentional religious or psychological impulse to channel Satan's will. Perhaps a deliberate effort by creators to invoke his presence, or it might have been an accidental byproduct of speculative creativity, where the act of imagining these texts inadvertently summoned its existence due to an unforeseen alignment of forces, whether divine, demonic, or otherwise. The critical question arises: is the Codex the actual satanic evil Bible? Do all three texts together constitute it, or are they part of a larger, possibly otherworldly inspired canon? In the absence of empirical historical evidence, this remains a speculative reconstruction, constrained by the text's imagined provenance. Psychological and sociological implications. A deeper inquiry. The manifestation of an evil Bible through the creation of these texts would reflect profound psychological and sociological dynamics. The unconscious reservoir of primal instincts including aggression, desire, and survival finds robust expression in their encouragement of unbridled impulses, as evidenced in Unleash the Inner Flame, the Codex, chapter 7, verse 1, or Chaos Reigns Supreme, the Manifesto, chapter 4, verse 9. Possibly influencing its emergence as a psychological release from societal repression that manifested Satan's will through the creative process. Sociologically, its acceptance would hinge on a cultural paradigm shift toward individualism, anti-establishment sentiment, or resistance to religious orthodoxy, potentially arising in response to dogmatic impositions or political authoritarianism, serving as a religious counterpoint that enabled its manifestation. The dualistic nature of the Codex suggests a flexible ideological construct capable of accommodating diverse psychological profiles, ranging from theistic zealots driven by eschatological fervor to atheistic strategists motivated by terrestrial hegemony, further shaping its emergence through the creative act, otherworldly forces, or an unknown origin, and raising the question of its unified or composite nature. Conclusion. While the Manifesto of the Shadowed Will, the Infernal Scriptures, and the Codex of the Eternal Flame furnish a rich and intricately detailed foundation that, through their creation, may have precipitated the manifestation of an evil Bible, they remain products of imaginative conjecture. Their 13-chapter architectures, 169 verses, and 10 commandments articulate a compelling narrative of resistance, authority, and eschatological triumph. However, no empirical evidence supports the manifestation of a real evil Bible from these versions as of the current temporal juncture. These texts stand as sophisticated intellectual and creative explorations, suggesting that the act of their creation might have opened a metaphorical door for Satan's evil Bible to manifest, potentially driven by religious dissent, psychological drives, speculative creativity, or otherworldly influences, with the origin of these influences remaining unknown, possibly an intentional invocation or an accidental summoning. The critical question persists: if manifested, is the Codex of the Eternal Flame the actual satanic evil Bible? Do all three texts together constitute it, or are they part of a larger, possibly otherworldly inspired canon? This invites sustained reflection on the demarcation between fiction, faith, and the human propensity for constructing alternative moral and spiritual universes.